Hello my friends, Dr. M is here to support your journey with principles of economics. We are talking about public goods. So we are looking at the previously introduced graph related to the public goods, and we discussed the movie example. The question that I left you last time was related to the impact of free riding upon the consumption of public goods in terms of quantity and price. Basically, as we talked about previously, free riding, essentially what it does, and perhaps it's a good time to illustrate what happens in terms of free riding. That would be with a movie example. Every time you have a free rider, it creates an interesting dilemma. And dilemma is, I'm just replicating what you have on the slide and to show you what happens to the free riding in terms of consumption and pricing of public goods. So you see that projection of the price and the quantity. This is how much individual is going to pay, because that represents individual demand, and that is represented by the market demand. So once you find the equilibrium, you project it to individual demand, and voila, you get your price. This is how much you pay for your ticket. Now, if you are able to reduce the free riding, you are not essentially making movie longer. If the movie was produced and lasted 1 hour and 30 minutes, it still stays. However, with reduction of free riding, you have by default more people participating in consumption of the movie that willing to collect more money. So your demand will go up. By default, you have more people who watch movie and pay for it. This is when the free rider is eliminated. In other words, when you have less illegal immigration, or when you legalized immigrants that are in this country illegally and they start paying taxes, your demand goes up. And this will dictate new equilibrium. And look what happens. Once you project the new equilibrium, the price for you as a taxpayer actually goes down. Interesting. So there are two things that happen. Price goes down, and there is more availability of the movie. So with that in mind, we can talk about how to finance the public goods. Now you understand the impact of free riding. Free riding is making individual demands more expensive. And once you get rid of the free rider problem, then you, in essence, reducing the price of your own consumption. So, how do you finance Lighthouse, as an example? Well, there are different suggestions that were brought in. Because Lighthouse serves as a public good, because it's transmitting the signal to all ships that are around, and there is no discrimination. One ship cannot stop consumption of the Lighthouse service by another ship. So it's a pure production of public good. How do you build the lighthouse, and who is going to pay for it, and how many lighthouses should be installed? That's the interesting question that is always arising with production of public goods. One suggestion was tax all people, and that was the problem that was discussed by Samuelson in Great Britain a long time ago, when all British people are taxed to finance public good. That would be one way to build the lighthouse. And the problem with that proposal, some people don't use the lighthouse, and yet they have to pay for it. Now, this problem has been addressed differently when it comes to highways. For instance, if you travel from Twin Cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul, to Chicago, there are some tolls that you have to pay along the way. This is how this public good production of ridership service is financed. Tolls are paid only by those who use this highway, and those who don't use the highway, they don't pay for it. That seems to be more efficient and more fair distribution of the public good. Why would you force somebody who never used this good to pay for it? So that was the second proposal that is being implemented. Now, I want you to understand that both are vital and prevalent around the world. One of the issues with the lighthouse is impossibility of securing the payment, because some ships, foreign ships, sail by Great Britain and they use the services of the lighthouse, but it's impossible to collect the money or the payment from them. And thus, the only way you can collect the payments from the ships if they come to the port. So that was the third solution as it was related to the lighthouse. Those ships that come to the port have to pay extra fees for the service of the lighthouse, but that, economically speaking, would discourage foreign ships to come to British ports, and thus it will translate in less business, in less economic activity. So I want you to appreciate the fact that there are some consequences, including unintended consequences, that could come with different ways and approaches how you pay for public goods that will reflect in production and reflect in production and pricing of it. The other question that is very interesting and exciting would be ownership. Who owns the lighthouses? Who owns the highways? Who owns the public goods like public radio station? So the ownership is critical, my friends. And let me give you an example why it is critical and it will be viewed as a very valuable experience. Ronald Coase, an economist, suggested that if you assign the property rights, private property rights, as much as possible to the allocation of goods at the market, that has more tendency to provide most efficient outcomes. Let me give you an example. In Africa, elephants were coming to the point of endangered species. And there were different ways that were attempted to save the elephants. One way was to have government own elephants and tax all citizens in this country to finance the project of multiplying the elephants. That did not work because there were always foreigners who would come and hunt elephants and pay up to $10,000 to make a kill, and then there will be local tribes that will consume the elephants. It just did not work. Elephants continue to decrease in price. I mean, in quantity. I apologize. So then they attempted to shift the property rights from the local government to international community. International community would raise the funds, build the fences, and hire security guards, and elephants still continued to decline in numbers. The problem was not resolved. And then they tried something different. They assigned the property rights to the local tribes. They make the property rights of elephants private to be assigned to the local tribes, and it was a fascinating outcome because the number of elephants started to grow. Basically, the local tribes were the ones who had to ration and monitor its own consumption of elephants, and they had to ration and monitor consumption by the foreigners. So that means that they treated elephants as their private good, private asset, which resulted in such desirable outcome. So that's a classical example where privately assigned goods could bring a lot of benefit and answer to a variety of different problems that otherwise we are stuck with due to the fact it's public good with all its issues. So now we can extrapolate the free rider problem in relationship to the public goods when it comes to copyrights. Basically, some people argue that copyrights is inefficient from economic perspective. Let me explain what they mean. Because knowledge by default is a public good, you can share the knowledge with other people, and people can know and increase the knowledge without reducing its own capacity at the same time, or without interfering into the capacity of other people. So knowledge is the public good by default, and thus it creates an interesting dilemma. Patents and copyrights are designed to protect sharing of public good like knowledge. And I want you to think about whether copyrights and patents should be eliminated because they restrict sharing of knowledge, or should they be protected and adhered to and enforced by the government. The best way to think about this question is in the short run and in the long run. And you engage the marginal economic analysis to think about this problem. It is correct that in the short run, patents and copyrights introduce inefficiency, because you are preventing other people to share this knowledge, you are actually introducing reduced production, reduced consumption, and every time you constrain something at the marketplace, there is reduced of something. So, and this reduced of something will always have inefficiency. On the other hand, in the long run, patents and copyrights introduced efficiency because they provide motivation for companies and individual suppliers to pursue discovery, to pursue new technology, to pursue research and development. So if I am a producer and I spend lots of my resources to invent something, let's say a vaccine from the virus, coronavirus or any other virus, and that may take lots of resources. Many sciences have to be paid, lots of tests, lots of lab hours and so forth, equipment. And then after spending so much resources, I have to share that for free. Or I have to share that by charging someone who collects the product from me without protecting this knowledge from copying by other producers. Because nowadays you can take any chemical decomposition of any drug and reproduce something that is going to be called generic version of the drug in a fairly quick way and inexpensive way. So that would diminish my motive, it will diminish my incentive, if you will, to produce something good and valuable in the long run, because copyrights and patents, they protect for a period of time any competitive rivalry or copying this product, and thus in the long run it is efficient, in the short run it's inefficient. And this is like a coin with two sides. Dichotomy, we discussed that in the past, and we certainly can employ that in this discussion as well. So I want to finish this presentation by stating that there are different type of ownership structures, because there are public and there are private goods, and there are also common access goods. Basically, it's based on the ownership. So-called public, they don't have an owner. Individual ownership has a well-defined ownership. And then you have a mixed of public and private. One example of private good would be a sandwich, or a pencil, or a piece of clothing. It's only consumed by one person at a time. Now, example of public goods we talked about, it could be a sunset or a sunrise, or this presentation, or a baseball game. Now, you have to be careful. Baseball game, although is a public good, the seat that is assigned to each individual is a private good. So there is some mixed ownership when there is consumption of the sports event. So you can actually enjoy both public and private at the same time. And finally, common access property. Common access property is shared access to the lake. There are some residential communities that have shared access to the lake, and that would be a common access property. It's owned only by a restricted number of individuals that reside within that community. And on this note, I want to finish this presentation, and thank you for your time, my friends. We'll see you soon. Bye.